Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Face the Truth. Got a surprise podcast here with someone that's pretty damn cool. I've known Court for a while now. Known him for a while, and I love his work. This guy is an awesome caricature artist. He's an illustrator. He's a fine artist. I was at his house years ago. We did karaoke. It was awesome, and I got to see a bunch of his paintings in person, which were really, really cool. One that sticks in my mind that I don't know why, but you did a painting of a baseball, and I remember just thinking how freaking awesome that was. It was a small little oil painting of a baseball. Well, it's like actual size, I think. But anyways, this guy is really awesome. He also teaches as well. Does a lot of live streaming. Everybody knows him. He's the one and only Court Jones.
Hey, Jason. Hello.
Hey, man. Thank you for doing this last-minute spontaneous podcast. But I like this because really a good chance to just catch up and talk and stuff. And, I was thinking about what I really wanted to talk to you about because, we have a lot of things in common and we've known each other for a long time. But I don't really know much about you, like where you come from exactly. Here's I'll give you my history of what I know of Court Jones. Never heard of you before, and then all of a sudden you pop up in the NCN. That's where I first heard of you. Before that, never heard of you before, but you seem to be already someone in the NCN, the National Caricature Network at the time, who everyone knew and loved, and you had been one of the I don't know if you already won the Nosy at that point or not. I can't remember. It was a while ago.
I think we met before the Nosy.
Oh, okay. But I was like, who is this guy? And like right away, I remember I just started noticing your work, and one of the things I loved was that you were doing a variety of work at the convention. Like you were doing pen and ink, you were doing painting, it wasn't just like the style. You had all these different mediums that you were really really good at, every single one, mastering them. And so that was my first impression. I was like, who is this guy? But I don't know where you come from. So what I'm curious about is, where did this all start? Were you an artist from the very beginning, like most of us, I guess? I'm just curious about your early days and what brought you to caricature specifically.
I had always drawn since I was a kid. And I just always had an affinity for it and a liking of it. But I was no better than any other kid. I was just one of the kids that stuck with it and kept on doing it. I don't think I was naturally gifted or anything. I think that's kind of a myth for most people, except like people maybe Mozart or something. But yeah, so I just kind of kept with it. I took art classes in college, high school, and junior high, and there was a little bit of dabbling in caricature my senior year in high school in my, advanced placement art class, which is you had to choose a focus for your portfolio. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, I chose caricature. I just had an interest in it, I guess. Yeah. I did a few celebrity caricatures, put them in my portfolio. I don't think it really impressed anybody. They weren't very good. But that was my first dabbling with it. And I always drew teachers, sketched the teachers, and that sort of thing. When I went to college, I got an art degree, but it was a college that wasn't very practical in its education. It was like so many universities today, and they're just very avant-garde and modern, and just as long as you talk about the art and write about the art and think about the art, that's the most important thing. What you actually produce is secondary. So I didn't really learn how to draw or paint at my four-year university where I got an art degree. So I took, right after that, I took a couple community college classes after I got my degree. And I like, oh man, this is actually better than the teaching I got at the university. And then just a couple semesters of that, I learned a little Photoshop, a little Illustrator, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just trying to get some skill sets. And right after, about 6 months after college, I got a job at SeaWorld, working there doing caricatures. And I showed them my, art portfolio from high school and whatever else I drew up, and I got the job, hired by Steve Fishwick, and
Steve,
great guy here in San Diego, and we didn't get any training. We got like one night of training. It was very informal because me and a couple other guys I was hired with were hired in the off season, so we didn't get the 2 weeks of training that everyone else gets. So we just were thrown out into the park, and I hated it at first for weeks and months and months. I just hated working every day. I wished I could like quit or get fired, but I'm like, no, it's an art job technically, and I like the people. I just hated selling. I hated drawing in front of people because I knew I wasn't any good. But I stuck with it, and I got better, and I started to like it more. And I worked in the theme parks for like 5 years. And when I was at the theme parks is when I heard from other people like Steve Fishwick and Steve Silver and some other people who had gone to the Watts Atelier here in San Diego. And I'd seen their life drawings in their portfolios. Like, whoa, you guys like actually do really good traditional art too. Where'd you learn this? And then they told me about the school. And it took me a few more years, but I finally started taking classes there in like 2001. And it's a traditional art school, a very small privately run school. It's not an academy. You don't get a degree. There's no entrance requirements. You just sign up for whatever classes you want and pay by the class. So I took life drawing, I took portrait painting, I took landscape, I took just anything that interested me. I took a lot of inking classes, gouache painting, oil painting. Eventually I started taking anatomy, and it was actually after about 2 years there, Jeff, who runs the school, he knew I did caricatures on the side or in my job, and asked me to do a quick demo for one of his classes where the focus was caricature. It happened to be features and facial expressions was the class, and they always spent the last class doing caricatures. And since I had experience and had trained artists at the theme park, he thought I might be a good, fit for that. So he liked what I did in that one class. So the next semester, he gave me my very own class to teach. He said, create a class and you can teach it. And so that began my career as an instructor at the Watts Atelier. And I taught there for about 10 years. And every time I thought of a new class, I would just run a new class. I would do variations on caricature, like I'd have caricature illustration with storytelling. I did also digital painting. I taught portrait painting there once, and they had me teach features and facial expressions. And I hadn't even taken that class. I had to teach that to myself from books before the semester started. And all the time while I was teaching there, I was taking classes. I was just trading my teacher's pay for classes, which was the best for me because I could actually take 2 or 3 classes at a time and actually work on my skills. And I'm like, I was introduced to Kruger a few years before that. And I was like, okay, like, how do I be like Kruger? It's, well, you got to learn the traditional skills. So I think I got most of my traditional skills in my 10 years at the atelier and applied caricature to these traditional techniques. So I have a nice blending of the two. So I've always loved doing lots of things. I love landscape painting. I love still lifes. I love just, moving paint around on the canvas. Oil painting is just the king for me. I just love oil painting, but I don't do much of it lately. It's mostly digital.
Yeah, no, I feel you, man. Well, there you go, everybody. Court Jones.
That's
everything
the whole
I wanted,
story.
he's answered.
Yeah, I guess I talked too much.
No.
Ask anything else.
No, that's great. No, that's awesome because that's the one thing I've always enjoyed about your work is that there's, that's one thing I can relate to is that traditional sense of, like, I don't know if you feel this way or not, but there's always a part of me that feels what's the way to put it, I guess guilty or like I think I have like this like almost like self-conscious feeling when I work digitally sometimes, like that I wish I was doing traditional more. And I kind of feel like when people give me compliments like, oh man, this is a killer painting. I'm like, yeah, but it's digital. Like it wasn't as hard, I don't, but it's not like that all the time. Like a lot of times I feel good about something I did, but I'm always trying to push myself to do work that just feels like a piece of art. It doesn't matter what medium. And when I can do that digitally, it's the best for me. That's where I feel the most, I guess, satisfied with the work I do. And it doesn't always come across that way. It's a challenge, I think, to do that sometimes. But one thing I noticed about your work is I do see you doing that a lot. And like recently you did these Obama Biden pieces when they were younger. And I thought those were really, really good. The Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid one was, I think, my favorite. That really felt traditional. It had such a nice like quality to it. And what I think is important for people to understand is you can't do that unless you know how to do that traditionally.
Yeah.
Like I can look at it and go, this guy knows how to paint with oils. He's doing the same things digitally. Because I saw people like, man, I want to paint like that. Well, you got to start working on oils, man. You got to put in that time, that 10 years that, because there's so many little things I notice when I look at that painting. I'm like, oh, dude, badass. Because he's a painter. He knows what he's doing. So.
Yeah, I whenever I talk to people, I made some videos on how to make, traditional digital paintings that look traditional. And in the comments section, there's always stuff like, well, just paint. Why do you paint traditional at all or why do you paint digital at all if you want to make it look like a traditional painting? Or why do I have to learn traditional painting first? Because that was one of the tips I gave, was if you want to be a digital painter and have your artwork look like it could be a traditional painting, paint traditionally first, because it teaches you process. It teaches you about layering paints. But it also gives you that aesthetic that you want to chase after in your digital work. Like, I choose certain brushes because I know it'll give me an effect that looks like paint on a canvas. I don't, I love the look of super clean digital paintings. They're absolutely gorgeous. I just don't want that for myself. I want paint strokes. I want the artist's hand visible. I waver a lot though. I do go back and forth between like sort of like a perfect look, a rendered look, and then like Sargent style brushiness. I'm always vacillating between the two, and it's sort of like this internal struggle that I haven't quite reconciled yet. How much brushiness, how much juicy looking paint should I try to emulate, versus how like fine and detailed and smooth should it look? So I'm always working on that. It's a struggle.
Yeah, it is a challenge. I mean, I've been asked that same thing too. Like, what, why do you care so much for it to look traditional if you're painting digitally? But I think what it is I think the answer to that question is the fact that when, if I can do that, then my thumbprint, my original hand is being seen more than if it was, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, if I can try to emulate the way I paint traditionally, digitally, that it comes across like you can't tell if this is one of my digital or one of my, traditional. To me, it feels more like my work, where I think, with digital painting, the one thing I've learned throughout the years is how to step back and look at a painting from a distance while you're painting digitally. And I recently, in the last couple of years or so, I've been doing a lot of my paintings where I do most of the painting really small. And I find that, for one, I can work so much faster. I'm not worried about the details, and there starts to happen. This like organicness starts to happen, where it starts to feel even more traditional. And then when you zoom in, you can go in there and do the final touches, and just it saves time, but also has that more painterly feel to it. And again, I love those little happy mistake things that happen. And I think if you're really getting into the digital thing and you zoom in the whole time, and like I'm guilty of it myself. I've done super photorealistic things that I'm like, why did I do that? Like, it's way too realistic. But it's so easy to do that. You can zoom way in there and you can get every little thing just perfect. But to me, it lacks a little life, And that's the one thing that I enjoy when I see your stuff is you like your Picasso piece. I really love that piece that you did.
That actually was an oil painting on canvas. Yeah.
And so that's what I thought. And I was going to say, like, but when I look at that, you could also say that was a digital that it's hard to tell. Like, you're really doing great stuff as far as keeping your same aesthetic, with the mediums. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and the aesthetic that you develop through working through your materials. I mean, people ask me, you always get questions from students or just colleagues or random people online that say, how do you develop a style? What is your style? Like, how can you make your style? And and I just tell them it's just something that develops naturally out of your influences, your teachers, and your materials mostly. Because if you're a watercolorist, your style is going to be very different from an oil painter, basically. Mm-hmm. If you're a pure digital artist, you never picked up a brush in your life, you're going to have probably more of a digital look, which is fine. It's just that's what it's going to be. So the materials have a big impact on style, and I like that look. That's just what I like to look at in a painting. I love simply rendered things that fool you and thinking it's more complex. I love vibrations of color. I love seeing brush strokes. I love seeing canvas. I love seeing the raw canvas poke through in places. To me, that's very exciting. It creates drama. Mm-hmm. And it makes me want to look at a painting more when I have more that I can use my imagination to fill in the gaps, when everything is finished for you, when it's totally described, every detail and eyelash is described, it's beautiful and super impressive. And you should be able to do that if you want to, but I don't hang around those paintings. I don't keep on looking at those paintings necessarily. I want to figure out how that was done with just a single brushstroke. And usually the answer is lots of trial and error. Sargent would get that simple look after many, many hours of painting and scrubbing it off and painting it again and just getting it just right. That's how he got that look. It was just labor. And that's the part that people don't want to put in, is the labor sometimes. It's,
No, it's true. No, Sargent's one of those artists that I always come back to, like, just for inspiration. And and every time I've got to see his work in person, it's one of those things where it's like the closest thing to a religious experience, I think.
Yeah.
Just like, gosh, man, this is like insane.
And you can always spot a Sargent from across the room, like in a gallery, like, oh, there's a Sargent. I'm going right to that. And it's because his style is so distinct. And it's not because of how perfect it was, but because of how he handled his paint in whatever way he did, and how he simplified things, how he designed shapes, how he posed and lit figures. All those things go into his visual language, into his style. So I can always spot a Sargent. I mean, sometimes I could get him confused with Zorns, if there's a Zorn next to a Sargent, but
there is some definitely some similarities there, but no, I know what you mean. It's pretty amazing. There was a show here recently, well, maybe a year or so ago now, but it was just so awesome to be able to see. There was just a whole show of just so many of his paintings, but then also like sketches, and just to be able to see the rawness of those as well. Like, and then towards the end of the show was a bunch of his watercolors, which are just like, I mean, I love watercolor, but like, when you see his originals, it's like magical looking at them. I mean, they're just so beautiful. And same thing. I mean, he has the same kind of approach where it looks so simple, but it's not. It's very complicated.
It's the right shape and the right value with the right edges.
Oh man, it's like, and he's doing this from life, and it's just like, it's even more mind blowing. I was gonna tell you, like, the digital traditional type thing. A few years ago, I'm maybe 5 years ago, maybe, Time Magazine had me do. They asked me to paint Angela Merkel for Person of the Year cover. And I know from experience now that when they ask you to do a painting like that, there's more than likely there's several artists painting the same person. And so you're not really being asked to paint the cover. You're being paid to do a painting of the person, and maybe yours will get chosen. Mm-hmm. And then there's several other people that are up for it too, like that, and other artists are painting those people. So Time was very specific about, and I was doing a digital painting. They're like, we want this to be. They sent me some references that were like okay, but there's all these they weren't the greatest quality, but there was all these things about them that they like they like the eyes from this, they like the mouth, but we want you to put all that together and then make it look as realistic as possible. Like, we don't have the kind of photo that we want that we would like to use, but we think that you could create it and make it look at that. And I'm like, yeah, I could totally do that. And so, and then I went to a thrift store, and I bought like a red, like, women's business, jacket pose, so I could get, the right kind of lighting. I did all that kind of stuff because she wears like these things. And so,
you posed for Merkel?
Yeah.
Nice.
Or maybe my wife did. I can't remember, but it might've been me. But anyways, I just put everything into making it as photorealistic as possible, and I pulled it off, and I was really proud of it. And I sent it in, and they were like, "Holy crap, this is awesome! Like, wow, man, this is so good." And even though it's digital, I tried to keep some painterly things in there, but really they wanted it to be more photo-like. And so, I put in extra effort to pull that across, or to make that happen, right? So the next morning, and I'm like, I don't even know if they're going to choose Angela Merkel. Someone else might get chosen. So, and maybe it'll end up in the issue, whatever. You never know. The next morning, my wife wakes me up. She's like, "You're not going to be happy about this." And I'm like, what? She goes, they chose the person of the year, and it's Angela Merkel. And I'm like, oh, so, and she goes, but it wasn't yours.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh man, okay, well, that's kind of a bummer, but so, it's to be expected. But then what happened is, then I see the painting they chose, and it's this Irish artist, Colin Davidson or something like that. Pretty well-known Irish artist, but his paintings are really super, like, not sloppy, but real, like, I like it's like very painterly and very like expressive and very loose, and there'll be like just really thick kind of goop paint in certain areas, and it's almost chaotic, but there's a beauty to it, and if you saw his work, I think you'd recognize it, but I remember just being like like, why, like, because I was like, I could do something really loose, like painterly, but he did his in oil, okay, of course, and he got the cover, and yay for him. But I just remember like feeling like at that point, like that was like almost like a sort of a changing or shift in my mindset from then on, like I don't really feel like I want to do that anymore, that I want to be that photorealistic anymore, even though that's what they asked me to do.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like, man, like, why didn't they choose, and I was like, is it because his was more expressive and painterly? And I think that's why it looked more like a piece of art, where mine just looked like a Photoshop photo in a way, you know what I mean? And so I from that experience kind of had me changing a little bit of, like, I don't really want to maybe put that out there into the illustration world, that I'm the guy to come to for super photorealistic things. I want it to look like a painting. I think it's important that it looks like a painting. And so that was one of those things where I even though I still do things sometimes that are more realistic, I still try to always have like some painterliness to it and everything.
I think I noticed that in your work. Your illustrations are like photos sometimes, but with so much drama and interpretation, and I don't know, it's something you do. You heighten the lighting. You make it not hyper realistic. That's not the word. That's because that's not what I mean. It's just I don't know. There's an energy to it that probably was not in the original photo. And I really admire that. It's just like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, that look. And I mean, sometimes you can just do it with the background, handling the background more with drips and strokes, but maybe deconstructing some of the facial structure a little bit in places around the edges, or where it's not that important.
Yeah.
It was so annoying. Years ago, people would accuse you of just photo manipulation, and people on the forums and whatnot. It's just so silly, because they don't understand how someone can paint that realistically, and when they can't do it themselves.
Yeah, it's such a funny thing, because when I was first getting started in all this, I also was very much inspired by Kruger, and my goal was to do my caricature work. I was really inspired by C.F. Payne and a lot of those artists, but I wanted to do that work, but I thought, man, if I can render as realistic as possible, I'm going to blow people away, and they're going to be impressed that I'm going to get work because of that. I mean, that was the whole thing. It's like, you want to get people's attention. You want to get, but then I realized after, like, I remember when my first book came out, I was so excited and proud of the work and everything. Now I look back at it and I'm like, oh, there's so much crap in there. But like, I remember, I think I was in the San Diego Comic-Con, and there were so many people there looking through my book, and they were like, oh, like, what program are you using to create these? Like, what is this, like a manipulation program? Like, people were saying stuff like that to me, and I'm like, I started feeling sick to my stomach. I started feeling like I put so much work into this. These are all painted. There's no manipulation. And I realized I rendered so much or too much, where it does feel like it was just distorted somehow. And so I think that's important though, and that's good because what it starts to do is it starts to teach you a little bit about your own aesthetics and where you want to go with it. Because, and also saves you time when it comes to having to do deadlines. Because, man, I used to kill myself, spend like just so many hours and hours and hours on one face. Where now I can bust out a face in just a few hours, I think, depending, But it's interesting though, it's just growth, But did you go through a period like that where one of my early memories of, I think you did it for ISCA or whatever. I don't know if it was ISCA or NCN, whatever it was, same thing. You did, I think it was Mick Jagger and Keith Richards piece, like the Saints or something like that.
Yeah, I did him like a religious painting, like a religious icon. Mick was like a knight with a lance, and the lance had a big condom on the top. And Keith had was the saint, one of the saints who was pierced with all the arrows, but I made it all like heroin needles. And I don't even know if he was like on heroin ever, but it seemed funny at the time. And yeah, that was my studio piece the year I won the Golden Nosy, and that one studio piece. And that was just a digital painting. One of my first digital paintings. I was like, that was the first one I was really proud of, and I was like, yes. And I was, of course, just emulating Kruger down to like, trying to do the Stones. I think it's the last time I ever tried to draw them.
Yeah, but that's my point though, is that like I could see, I could relate, because I'm like, okay, here's another guy who's doing. You get kind of the same goal in a way. It's I gotta say though, I don't think we were trying to be like Kruger. I think we were inspired. Okay, I see where he has set the bar, and I'm gonna do my own thing. Because for me personally, I love Kruger's caricature work.
Yeah.
But Tom Fluharty actually told me this a long time ago, like, gosh, maybe 15, 16, 17 years ago, when he was first him and I were first becoming friends. He was like, your work's really good, but close the Kruger books. He's like, I can tell that he's a huge inspiration in the way that you're exaggerating, the way you're drawing so much like how he does things. And at first I was like, that's good, and then I remember one of my first meetings at Mad Magazine. I met with Sam Viviano, and he told me, hey, your work's really good. I need to see more than heads, though. I need to see like scenes, characters interacting with each other. And he goes, and close the Kruger books. Like, he saw it, and he was like, let me tell you something, Jason. Sebastian Kruger will never be asked to do a cover for us. He'll never be asked to do anything. Not that he's not good enough. He's amazing. But it's too much in this other direction, and it's and that's not a bad thing. He's really good, he's really creative and everything, but what we're looking for immediate likeness with exaggeration, with humor, but it's got to be immediate. And he explained all these things, and I remember just like kind of being blowing my mind a little bit, like, because I had Kruger on such a pedestal like that. But I realized, what, these guys are right. What I need to do is I need to learn from these other artists like Kruger, and take the aesthetics from it, right? Like the quality. Like I see how much attention to detail he's doing in this and that, and it's inspiring. Learning from Sargent about edges and brushwork and stuff. Put all that stuff aside and just draw how I draw. And then take those aesthetics and put it all together. It's like cooking, right? But it's funny because people ask all the time. I'm sure you get asked this, like, how do you develop a style? And I really think that it just comes from painting over and over and over and over and over again, because your style will start to come through. It's just. But I think it's fun that in a way that we have that shared thing in common, like you and me and a bunch of artists were. Like Kruger was definitely, I would definitely say he's like the godfather of for a lot of us, because there was a lot of brilliant caricature artists before him, but he was like one of the first to, like, as far as I'm concerned, do what I envisioned. In fact, I think I've talked about this before, but my dad bought me the Stars book when I was 18, and when I saw it, I was pissed off because that was exactly what I was trying to do, and I was like, someone's already doing it, and he's amazing at it. He's been doing it since the 80s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it was one of those things where I feel like it was like either I learn, I get inspired by this, or I just quit. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's kind of how it felt anyways, the first time.
And though, you are now Kruger to a lot of generation of people. You're the guy that they look up to. I want to be like, I'm gonna do what Seiler does. You're setting the bar now for everyone, really. I mean, that's how I look at you. I mean, you're constantly raising that bar, and your damn paintings are in my head when I'm rendering my own. I'm like, oh, God, I gotta be more like Jason in this thing that I'm doing. But it's a good thing. I admire your work ethic and the skills that you worked hard to develop. And that's what people should look towards. Likewise, when they're looking at their artistic heroes or their artistic parents, whatever you want to call them. Is just look at what they put in to get where they're at, and hold yourself to that standard. Kruger holds himself to a certain standard in his drawings and the way he puts brushstrokes down. He doesn't stop before it's done. Don't give up on it, but if something is not working out, give up on that one and then start it again, like Sargent would do. It's the work ethic and the skills that you should be trying to, get to, not style. I had a teacher put it a good way once, I think at the Watts School. A young student is like a raw piece of metal or clay that's unformed. And every teacher that comes along is going to hammer their marks into you and shape you and bend you. And every artistic hero you have is also going to inadvertently leave their marks. Till when you are done with your training, you're this new shaped piece of metal that has elements of Sargent, elements of Kruger, elements of Zorn, elements of your teachers. And you're this brand new thing that's a combination of all of those things. And you're a new work of art that's been created by all these other artists. And that's why you should have multiple influences too, just because you don't want to ape somebody's style. You don't want to just copy it because it's trendy. Yeah. That's the obvious.
It's interesting. I've always had this weird, like, I was my dad's an artist, and I grew up around art all the time, and so he was a huge influence. Just seeing him drawing and painting all the time, but like I never really studied any artists for most of my life. I just like I would buy comic books and I would just copy comic books. Like I would buy like a Spider-Man comic and just draw every page. That was kind of, I learned how to draw that way. Batman, Ninja Turtles, stuff like that. And then just draw, and then I would just draw nature. I would just draw whatever, just draw anything. And then even when I was in my early 20s and I was doing caricature, I wasn't influenced by anybody. It was all pure and natural. And it's kind of funny when I look back at those drawings. I was like, oh, I can see myself in those drawings still. You know what I mean? Like it's interesting to look back. Like I think one of my first caricatures ever was that actor, something Woods.
James Woods?
James Woods. Yeah. I think it was my first one I ever did. But as I started getting older, it's just funny. I remember like even like when I had written, I think Tom Richmond a long time ago, man, like 98 maybe, something like that. And just said, hey, I really want to do more caricature work, and I see, I'm a fan of your work, whatever. And he's the one that introduced me to NCN. Oh, you should check out this group. And so that kind of opened the doors. I'm like, oh, there's people are making a living doing this. Like it kind of like opened my eyes to that. But there still wasn't any artists that really inspired me or that I was trying to emulate. And then it was the Kruger book. That's that time where I'm like, oh my, what? And then shortly after that, around 2001 or so, is when I became aware of. I started paying attention to what's being published. I just started noticing the CF Payne guy everywhere. Dan Adele, Roberto Parada, Fred Harper. Like I started seeing all these these artists out there. I'm like, oh my gosh, people are making a living. They're being published. And then I became aware of Jan Beek around 2001. And then he became my next, like, oh, that's how I want. Then I started really pushing my exaggeration more, and like, so it's interesting because, you know, it's funny because I know artists out there that will never admit that they were inspired by, you know, you know what I mean? But to me, I like that thing that you said about the banged up metal and everything, because, and I think you can relate to this as well, but like what you were saying, I can look at my work and every once in a while I'm like drawing something. I'm like, oh, there's a little Ep.107w beak there that just came through, you know, something that I picked up on. Like, I remember he has a very specific way of drawing eyes. You know, he likes to show the whites of the eyes a lot. And there's like certain little things that he does, but every once in a while I'll draw something. I'm like, oh man, I can see that coming through a little, you know, it's kind of cool. But anyways, so you've been doing this for quite a long time then, since, as far as like when did you start getting into actual illustration with your work? Because you said 2000, around 2000 when you started working in the parks.
No, I started working in the theme parks in '96.
Oh, in '96. Holy.
Yeah, and worked in the park
I graduated
system.
high school that year.
Yeah, no, that was the year I graduated college. Yeah.
Wow.
So, aging, I'm dating myself. But yeah, so 5 years in the theme parks, and it was around in the very late '90s. I started doing illustrations for local companies, or, you know, friends of friends. I would do little pen and ink drawings for like ballet companies because my friends were ballerinas in the theater. And you know, I had in like '98 or '99, I had my work up on a billboard in San Diego, and I was like, "Oh my God, I've made it!" But it was a terrible cartoon drawing combined by today's standards. I didn't have really any training at that point at all.
Yeah.
But it was 2001 I started properly training, learning painting, and probably about 2003 before I started feeling like I could actually paint things that I could show the world. I'd done a few oil paintings of like caricatures, you know, in my want to be like Kruger phase, where it was like I painted like the X-Files and Bill Cosby and a couple others. And looking back on them now, they're just horrific to look at because I didn't have the fundamental knowledge and skills to really pull off the paintings. I was just copying style without knowing the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And but yeah, around 2003 or 2004, and that's about the time you and I think first started talking, because I think I saw you in like this short-lived magazine called Caricature Magazine. There was an article in it on you where you had like an Owen Wilson caricature that you had done that was like in watercolors.
Oh, that was my first painting ever.
Oh,
like,
was
really?
it? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was 17 years ago.
And then like around that, I think shortly after that, we started talking. Like you'd emailed me and I'd emailed you. And when you showed me your Napoleon Dynamite, like it was probably like 2004, 2005, I guess. I was like, oh my God, this guy paint this? This is gonna be a guy to watch. I mean, like, it was digital, I guess, but it was like so freaking beautiful. The tater tots alone made my mouth water.
That's really funny because it's really funny that you remember the Owen Wilson and that, because the Owen Wilson was literally my first painting where up to that point I was doing like pen and ink and then like filling things in with watercolor, you know. But that's the painting where my first wife, she was like going into labor, but she didn't have any need for me. Her friend was in the bathroom with her. She was in, you know, they said that if you know, she was having contractions, and like if you go into a hot bath and the contractions continue, then you're about to go in labor. But if they stop in a hot bath, it's coming, but you got a little bit more time. So she was in the bathroom for quite a while with her friend, and I was just in the kitchen, like nervously pacing back and forth. And I remember I basically had a panic attack. Like, I'm not ready to be a dad. I don't even know how to paint. I'm a joke of an artist, you know. Like, and I remember thinking like all these other artists that I look up to are painters, and I'm never gonna make it if I don't paint. And I was like having that moment then. Like I should have been, you know. I don't know what I was thinking, but basically I found a picture of Owen Wilson, got some watercolor paint, and I just did my first painting. I'm like, I'm just gonna learn how to paint right now. I remember she came out of the bathroom. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm painting. You know, like, and then she went into labor that night. We had my daughter Isabeau. 2 days later we were back, and I did one of 50 Cent. And I just kept doing it every day. I'm going to do a painting every day. I was forcing myself because I knew I'm not going to make it as an illustrator that I want to be. Because at that point I was doing things for like Cracked magazine and stuff, and really just crappy stuff. You know, I didn't have like a style yet. I didn't have anything. You know, I could draw, but I didn't know what to do with it. It was like it's having, you know what I mean? It was kind of a weird phase. But then you brought up the Napoleon piece, and it's just funny because both those pieces are like transitional pieces for me personally, because before the Napoleon piece, I had been doing all these covers for this religious satire magazine called The Door, and they were paying me crap to do, you know, like I think $100 or $150 for a cover, but it was a cover, right? And that's all I cared about. So I was doing all these covers, but I was just mixing every medium possible. And I was trying to figure out, I was learning how to paint. I was doing acrylic covers at the time and stuff. And then Joe talked me into doing the digital painting. And I started messing with the digital painting, and I started realizing, wow, I can paint faster. And I think I can get, because of that, I can get more detailed.
Yeah.
And with that Napoleon cover, they gave me that cover, and I thought, I'm going to pretend in my mind, I'm gonna convince myself basically that this is a cover for Mad Magazine, and I'm not gonna be bummed out that I'm not making any money on this. I'm making a lot of money on this, and this is a huge cover for me, and I got to put everything into it, and I got all the props. I got someone to pose for me. I got the lighting just right. I never did that before. I never did any of that Illustrator type stuff. Before that, I was just making things up out of my head. I don't know why I thought that was the way to do it. And I put everything into that, painted every little tater tot, all that stuff. And then I never worked with that magazine again. I later found out that they felt bad because they knew that I put so much work into it, and they knew that the pay wasn't okay. But then the next big job I got was Time Magazine. And it was because of that cover. Yeah. And so that attitude adjustment and that, that focus, I realized from that point on, I'm going to do that with every painting from now on. I'm going to do what I did with that Napoleon Dynamite every single time.
That's really good advice, because in the beginning, especially, so many young artists have crappy paying, art jobs. And if you don't treat it like it's the cover of Time Magazine, you'll never get the cover of Time Magazine. It sucks for a while. I got one of the worst paying jobs I ever had in illustration was for a local newspaper. It was a cover about some local restaurant owner, and it was pitiful. I mean, and they knew it was bad. They loved my work though, and they wanted to put it on the cover. I'm like, it's a cover. I haven't done a lot of them, and I didn't get much acclaim from it or any future jobs necessarily, but I did win like 2 journalism awards for it that I didn't even know that the newspaper entered it for their annual the Society of Professional Journalists or something. So it was a nice thing to put on my resume. In other words, that ended up being valuable for that. It's like, oh, award-winning illustrator now all of a sudden, because I treated this thing. Yeah, I got out in my patio. I posed in the outfit because I didn't have a picture of the guy's body. I had to I put on everything. The light, everything was just very spot on to what my photos. I took photos of everything. Went down to the location, shot the restaurant, and I was really really proud of that piece. But I was just on this little rinky-dink free handout newspaper that I didn't get paid anything for really. But yeah, it garnered some awards. And it was just
you learned from that.
It taught me personal standards, that sort of thing.
Exactly. I think that's super important. Yeah. What was like one of the first illustration jobs that you did that kind of changed things for you in the illustration world? Because you do a lot of illustrations now for publications. You've done,
Yeah. I mean, I do so little anything that's really high profile though. It's just, I'm one of those artists that usually does stuff for clients nobody's ever heard of, and they're not going to be on the national whatever. But probably the stuff I did for Upper Deck was like my first big thing that, was really cool, that went out to a wide audience. Upper Deck and Blizzard. Well, I did one Blizzard, the one, World of Warcraft card. And but the rest were all political caricatures for Upper Deck. And, they're the baseball card company.
I remember those. Yeah. Those were awesome.
So they wanted all the candidates in the year 2007 and 8 to be as historic ball players, like Mitt Romney, Barack Obama, and Rudy Giuliani, and just put into weird situations. And they would art direct. They would tell me how to, what situation to paint. And that work wasn't some of my best work, I don't think, because I did have to kind of rush through a lot of them all at once. I did a lot of them in one sitting or in one commission. And but for the time, it was good for my skill level at the time, I think. But it was cool because I still get people calling me about it. In fact, just this week, I just sold one of my World of Warcraft paintings I did back in 2007. Like the original, it was actually an oil painting I did. One of the few I did for Upper Deck that was actually an original work of art. And that's another reason to work traditionally, because of that fact. You can sell it after the fact if it becomes a collector's item or people, really like your work. Some people get real passionate about collecting certain things, and it's nice to be able to have that extra income to sell the original.
Yeah, that's happened to me before, where I've done a piece. I think it was a painting I did for Rolling Stone where it was I can't remember what paint. Oh, the guy from the Eagles, Don Hahn or whatever. Henley. And I was really happy that they thought it was an oil painting. Mm-hmm. But they said, hey, the owner, I think his name is Jay or something, the owner of Rolling Stone, he wanted to buy the painting. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is, and I said, I had to tell him, like, well, this is a digital painting. And I thought they knew that because they only gave me 2 days to paint it.
Oh my God.
Basically 2 or 3 days. It was like, how would I have done that? I can't do that in oils in that small amount of time. I said, but I can make a really high quality print, and he wasn't interested. He didn't want a high quality print.
That's unfortunate.
It's printed in the magazine,
We do say all the time, digital is generally faster and cleaner than working in, let's say, oils or acrylics. But I spend a lot of my time in my digital paintings doing things, extra work to make it look traditional. Like I'll paint it and it's too smooth. I got to go back and paint over some things with some texture now. Whereas if I was painting it just with oils, in a sense, it might go a little quicker. And so I don't know if the times might balance themselves out, traditional versus digital, because I do have sometimes trouble making it look like an oil painting. It is an effort sometimes. Whereas when you're doing oil painting, it's kind of effortless because the canvas is there and you've only got one layer to work on. And
that's funny. Yeah. I am a slowpoke with oils. I usually like the blocking stage is pretty quick. That's pretty fast. But then once I start getting into, starting to like pull it all together, I like to slow down a little bit. I'm kind of a romantic with it. Like I like to, I mean, this sounds kind of dorky, but it's the truth. I like to put on classical music, and it gets me in this, like, I feel like I'm doing something, sophisticated. I don't know, like, so I'll put on some classical music, some Rossini and Verdi or something, and just I don't know, I get in like this weird mental state, and I'll paint for a few hours and realize I only did this small spot, and I don't know. I have a lot of respect for artists out there that do illustration in like traditionally. It's kind of crazy. There's some artists out there. Actually, recently I talked with Tyler Jacobson. He was on the podcast, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work, but he is really just a brilliant artist. He does a lot of like D&D art and like, a lot of fantasy sci-fi stuff. And he's just amazing. But he, in the last year or so, decided he wanted to go back to oil because he missed it so much, because he had been doing everything digitally. And it's crazy because he was like the same thing. Like, I want to be able to sell these paintings, not just for the company, but I want to be able to sell the originals to like fans and collectors out there. And he realized there was a big business there, for him. And so he switched back, in the same amount of time, he's doing the same paintings now with oil. And it's pretty mind blowing because they pretty much look the same. Like, it's pretty, some of them I'm like, wait, that's an oil? Like, it looks, he's like, yeah. And he does them in the same amount of time. And he's got I forget what he called it, but he's got like this awesome setup. He's got this, some kind of computer app or something that helps take the photo. It does something with, man, I'm blanking. It's on the podcast I talked with him about. I want to go back and listen so I can find out. But he's got something now that he photographs the paintings and they're just perfect. They look amazing, like better than a scan. And it's some weird thing that some contraption or something that he could photograph paintings with. I wish I remember. I have to look it up to find out what it is now, but because that's one of the things I always have a hard time with is getting a good photo of a traditional piece. And like here in Chicago, it's so expensive. Like if you want to go get your art photographed or scanned, it's like ridiculous. So I've a few of my past commissions I've done, I only have like shitty photos I took with my camera of the work. So I don't have like anything really good. Do you do anything? Like, do you have any system for that?
Oh yeah. I learned trial and error and from other people. I've got a really good system now for photographing artworks. Maybe I should do a YouTube video about it, like a little instructional thing, but it's all about the angles of the lighting and getting polarizing filters on the lights in addition to a polarizing filter on your lens. That's the key. A circular polarizing filter that's oriented just right, because it will knock down all reflections that come off that painting. And then once you need a good camera, I think.
Yeah. I don't have a good camera.
Saying, but
you got to listen to that podcast because he talks about what he uses, and I really wish I would remember what it was, but I remember it blew my mind, but I didn't remember enough. I obviously have to go back and listen to it.
And which podcast was that again?
With Tyler Jacobson. It was like 5 or more episodes ago. Yeah, okay. He's super awesome artist. I think he lives in like Seattle now or Portland, something like that. But anyways, that's always been something that like blows me away. There's so many artists out there that do this, like Tim O'Brien. He's one of those artists that still does these same deadlines I do, but he's doing them in oil. I'm like, what the heck, dude? Like there was one he did, I think it was a Der Spiegel cover or something, and it was a Trump cover, and I commented and I was like, wow, it's so cool to see you working digital. I didn't because I know he does digital studies. He'll do a digital study, and sometimes the digital study looks like a final illustration. It's like, why did you just send him that, but he goes, oh no, this is an oil painting. I'm like, what? I was convinced it was a digital painting because I zoomed in on it and it looked close. And it looked like digital. Even when I zoomed in, it looked digital. So I was very confused by it. But then I was like even more impressed. Like, holy crap! Like I know what those deadlines are, and like that's just crazy. I don't know. Like for me, one of the main reasons I switched over was because at the time, I think it was probably around 2004 or so, where I was getting super stressed out with the deadlines. Like it was just, I was doing a lot of acrylic, and I was happy with the work I was doing, and art directors seemed to be happy, but it was so stressful. Like I just was like, this is so crazy to get to do this in this amount of time. And Tom Fluharty at the time was only working in acrylic, and he was doing a lot of Weekly Standard covers at the time that were all acrylic covers and super elaborate details and stuff. And I started, this was like the Weekly Standard had kind of started flirting with me at the time about having me do work for them, but they never hired me for a while. It was kind of like a tease. And at the time, like Tom was doing covers, CF Payne, like a bunch of artists that I looked up to were doing stuff for them. And and it was funny because at the time I really didn't know anything about the political side of things. All I thought of was, hey, all these artists I like are doing covers for that magazine. I want to do covers for that magazine. That's all I cared about. I didn't know what left wing was or right wing was. I really just wanted to do caricature art. That was it. And I remember writing Tom, being like, how are you doing these paintings so quickly? I mean, he was way more skilled and had been painting for like 20 years before me. But he told me about his I think it's called a Stay Wet box with the foam and the acrylic paper that you wet. And then he has like this mix that he would mix these two different products together, and he had a little mister, and he would spray his paint, and he would put that in the refrigerator, and his paints would stay wet for weeks. And I was like, I got to get that. And so I went and bought all that stuff and started doing it, and it changed everything for me. I started painting like so much faster. I started being able to paint better. And what I think what happened was they were starting to work in the same way that oils do. Like with oils, where you can just kind of keep rendering away. Where acrylics, my problem was they were driving so fast, and and it was about that time was when Joe Bloom was like, dude, you should try this digital thing. And he finally talked me into it. And so, but it's just interesting to see, because at that stage I switched because of the stress, really. And then as I kept going on, there's all these artists that have kept traditional, kept it, like Fred Harper. He's been a good buddy of mine for a long time now, and he still does mostly gouache, every time he does an illustration. But it was interesting, last time I was at his house, he's all about the iPad now. And it was really cool to see, because he's not a digital guy, but he started messing with the iPad and realized that in Procreate he can really mimic his style almost exactly. And he showed me this cover he did for the week, and I couldn't tell. There was no difference. It was just so cool to see. And he was like all excited and stuff. He's like, yeah, like, dude, I did this in like less than half the time. It's like so easy. he's like, man, but it's just funny to see, because I was wondering this for years, like, why are these guys still doing it like this? It's crazy. It's impressive, especially with the kind of stress that goes along with the deadlines and art directors changing things. And
yeah, the changing things is the main reason that probably is the most practical to still do digital, aside from time. But do you ever get easy deadlines anymore, where you do take the time and actually do a traditional media painting for someone, or all your deadlines just really quick turnarounds?
All my deadlines are like annoying for the most part. Yeah, I mean, I kind of created rules for myself that kind of help the stress factor, because the stress is a killer. Like, deadlines can be really daunting. And so basically what I do is I do no traditional work for clients, and like for publication or anything like that. Never. Because the way I look at it is, they do not pay enough money. They don't pay enough money for me to do a traditional piece to put, because I know it's going to take way more time for me. I'm not as quick. I like to take my time. And if I do an oil painting, basically, if I'm going to do an oil painting for someone, it's going to be a big commission. It's going to be a private commission. And I've had that, that happen every once in a while. Like a client's like, hey, we really love this painting you did. We would love to have it traditional. And then they pay me to do an oil painting of it. And they're really happy with it and everything else, but they have to pay like way more for it. And so that's just the way I do it. Like, so it's only for private commissions or for my personal stuff, just because, for example, like Rolling Stone, every single time I've done something for them, it's been like a day or two, and I just don't, first of all, I don't have the equipment to scan or any of that. I mean, I just don't work that way anymore. So I used to have scanners and all that stuff. I don't have any of that stuff now. So for me, the oil process is a much more, it's a different mindset for me, and it's a different kind of a commission. It's more like, hey, you're serious. You want to buy like a serious piece of art. Okay. Not that a caricature art wouldn't be serious. It's just that if it's an original oil painting, I tend to put way more into it, like hours and that sort of a thing. Yeah, I'm just not that fast.
I get those jobs that maybe they're not paying a lot, but if it's a good subject that you think is marketable, it might be in your best interest, if you have the time, to do a traditional painting, because you could sell it later, if it's a popular subject matter, and
I have
say, hey, screw it,
done
I'm
it.
gonna do this one.
I have done it before.
traditional.
Like I did that once with like a Weekly Standard cover, like 2009, I think, correctly here. They asked for a, like, normally same with them. They used to give me 2 days, just like the Washington Examiner's 2-day thing. And it was Edgar Allan Poe, and I was like, oh man. And I told them, but this one they gave me more time because they knew it was. I think they hired me the week before, which they never do that. Usually it's the day before, but they knew they were doing a special. I think it was like 200 years from his death or something. I can't remember what it was. It was some kind of special thing. And so I told them, like, what would be really cool is if this was like a watercolor painting, like just black watercolor, like just like, because I want to build up these layers of like the washes, and it's just, there's something about that will fit Edgar Allan Poe, Yeah. And so that's one of the only ones. That was a while ago, but I mean, I'm not opposed to doing that. It's just, it really just depends on timing. And I mean, I just did that poster, so it's not always about money. Sometimes an opportunity comes where you have to, like the movie poster I just did. They didn't have much of a budget for it because they had to, it's kind of an indie film in a way. And so once I gave them my quotes for what I would like to get paid for the movie poster, they were just like, well, we just don't have that. And don't worry, let's not worry. Let's just forget it. And I was like, whoa, wait. I don't want to let that go. I think this is perfect for me. It's a good fit. And I really love the characters, all the actors that are in it. This is right up my alley. I'm all about comedy and everything else. So I don't want to let this one go. So I basically was like, what can we do? Let's work something out. So in those kind of, when that happens, I think it's worth it to to do what you can, if you believe in a project,
Oh yeah.
So, but I mean, in the illustration world, from my point of view on it, from my experience, there is no set anything. You know what I mean? Like, and what we're going through right now, this is a really, really crazy time for everybody. And we don't know what's in the future for us right now, and what's going on with illustration. And I've personally been affected by it. I'm sure you've experienced things with it. And right now it's like, hey, got to do what you got to do to get by. It's you can't hold on to the same exact standards or things that you did before all this COVID stuff happened. You got to be able to go with the flow a little bit.
Yeah, this has really hit home to me how important it is to be diversified in your skill sets and your offerings, and not just do one type of thing. Like, because Debbie, my wife, and I both do caricatures live at events, trade shows, and parties, and that all ended like abruptly. And that was the main source of our income. We're like, what are we gonna do? And we worked at it a little bit, and I've just been getting a lot more commissions and illustration work. Honestly, I don't know how it happened, but it's kind of filled in the gaps for me. I don't think Debbie's working as much as me. She's looking for it, but I've been real fortunate in that I have traditional skill sets. I'm doing like the commissioned portrait for someone, like actually a graphite portrait for some family. It's not oils, cool. So that's kind of it's cool. A nice change to do that.
That's
nice. With pencil on paper, and just other stuff I've been doing, some other corporate stuff. But it's caricatures and traditional stuff, sort of a mix. And for the traditional stuff, it's like this company contacted me to do caricatures originally of some sports players for some branded merchandise. And And it developed that, oh, you know what? The NFL is kind of like wary about caricatures. So let's actually do portraits on these all. So they're safer to get approval. And I'm like, oh, great. It's the big head portrait instead of an actual caricature, which I hated for years. I would see that. I would see, like, why are those sports caricatures? Why do people call them caricatures? They're not caricatures. They're obviously just portraits on little bodies. But this is why. It's because there's lawyers involved and lots of people to approve the likeness. And it's just safer. And it's just what the client wants. So, you know, it's good work. So, and it's some nice portrait painting practice, too.
Oh, yeah. No, that's really cool.
Yeah, whenever I can show them, I'll make the statement, I'll make the disclaimer, like, hey, I know these are not caricatures, they're just big head portraits.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I remember the same thing, like in my younger years, being so judgmental about work I saw of other artists, thinking, oh, I could do something cooler than that. And then you start to realize, oh, wait, they're under certain circumstances. That's why they had to do it this way. It wasn't because they're not a good artist or whatever. It's just because, yeah, they only had a couple days, you know, numb nuts, you know, and like once I started getting into it, I realized I'm like, oh, this is really hard. You know, this is not just like, you know, there's a lot. Like I remember, you know, like Daniel Dell, I really like his, I was not really a big fan of his caricature work. But his painting, I loved his oil painting, and I love his watercolor work. But I always thought his caricatures were just portraits with like little bodies, which is what they were. Yeah. But then I realized as I started getting into it, like that those clients, like Vanity Fair, and these different things that are hiring him, they're paying him a shit ton of money, and he's like, "Yep, I'll do exactly what you want."
Yeah. God, I love the quality of his work, though. They're so beautifully rendered. And
yeah,
I was at the ISCACon when he was the guest speaker, and he did some live drawings of people there, and the pencil renderings were just so delicate but bold at the same time. He's awesome. The likenesses were perfect, and it was his total Dan Adele style. It was just a big portrait head. He's slightly caricatured, not much.
Yeah.
But it was so appealing to look at. There's just something about the proportions he uses and the three-dimensional quality to the drawings, and I love looking at his work.
Yeah, he's something, man. And like his traditional work is really beautiful to look at too. Like he's like a master with watercolor. Just amazing work. But anyways, hey man, it was awesome to be able to chat with you for a little bit, and we got to do this again sometime, man. This was really good to just talk and hear a little bit about your. I was always curious about, like, just trying to think about little Court Jones. What was little Court Jones like? You know. By the way, where does Court come from? Like,
well, it's short for Courtney. It's my full name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my mom just named me and my brother and sisters with C names, Cass, Cam, and Courtney. And I was either going to be Courtney or Corbin. I think was down to those choices. So my mom chose Courtney. I don't know why. I never grew up, you know, now it's generally known more as a girl's name. And I never experienced that growing up.
Is it Irish?
What's that?
Is it Irish?
I think the name technically is French derivation, like Courtenay. There's like a province in France.
Oh, I think I've met someone, an Irish person once. I think their name was Courtney.
It could be. I have Irish Welsh descendants, but that's more like last names. It means like, actually, I think it derives from a person who attends court, like a courtier or a lord or something. I don't know. I looked in the derivation. It's hard to understand, but yeah, I just go by court. It's just more symmetrical. Court Jones, each has 5 letters. Sounds more manly too, you know?
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking us to court. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for hanging out and doing this with me, man. And
pleasure talking.
Yeah. And do you have anything coming up that you want to, like, anything you want to promote, your socials or anything like that? Let people know what's going on.
Yeah. My Instagram at courtjonesartist, and my website's courtjones.com. Real easy to remember. I do my YouTube weekly live stream on Sundays at noon Pacific time. So people can always join me there. That's something I started doing at the beginning of the pandemic, just to connect with people and to stay busy. While we're locked down still. So I'm going to keep trying to do that for the foreseeable future every Sunday, just a different subject. And I try to make them like teaching things. It's not just, hey, watch me draw.
Yeah.
I try to share whatever I can. I'll do like a challenge for myself. I'll do, okay, I'm going to do ink and watercolors this week, or I'm going to do this kind of study, or I'm going to do digital but make it look traditional. And I did one on color theory. Sometimes I prepare several days for the live stream. But sometimes awesome. I can't put all that much into it. And I am working on something long term that I can't talk about yet because it's still in the early stages regarding teaching. But that's a long ways off. It's a couple of years off. So people will talk more about that later.
Yeah. And like I said, we got to do this again sometime. This was fun. I like. Am I frozen?
Did the call end? No,
I'm here. Can you not hear me? Can you not hear me? Well,
there was a problem with the network.
I'm leaving all this in here because this is great. Here. I'm still here. You were still. I could hear you and see you and everything, and so I just said, well, I guess this is a way to end it, and I started. So it's kind of funny, but whatever. But yeah, if there's anything that you want to say real quick, and then we can, just say sayonara or.
That was it, I guess, basically. Nothing else to plug, really. So, but yeah, it was kind of funny. Your look on your face when you froze was kind of like you look sort of side eye at me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, okay, freaked me out. You froze for a second again. I'm like, this is like, but anyways, hey man, again, thanks again for doing this. Really appreciate it, and we definitely have to do this again. And it's fun talking art with you, man. And I we speak the language. You know what I mean? There's like I really love talking with another artist that I can understand. So
yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're awesome, man. Thanks again, and be safe. Say hi to the lovely lady for me, and to everyone else. We'll catch you next time. Next week, talking with an awesome illustrator, Dean McAdams, really incredible artist, and so we'll look forward to that. And until next time, we'll catch you all on the flippity flop.
You want answers? The truth shall set you free. I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.